Hello and welcome to my channel. In today's video, we'll be seeing another video by Mission Kali by Bible researcher named Mr. Senbaga Perumal. He has read the Bible up, down, right and left. Maybe that's the reason why he understands the Bible in the upside down manner, right? In today's video, we'll be saying 10 objections from him from the video that he has made in Mission Poly, and then we will see how we can refute those objections. Objection number 1. The God of the Bible is a God to a particular race, caste and nation. He does not bother about the other nations or castes or tribes. This claim is actually not, like we will try to see this based on some of the verses in the Bible. Exodus 9:16 says that I have raised you up for this very purpose, that I may show you my power and that my name might be proclaimed in all the earth. The problem with the Mission Poly is that they always claim that the translations are wrong, the words are wrong. So I will see the Hebrew version here. We will see that the word earth is used here. The original Hebrew word itself is earth. It means that the name of God should be preached to all the earth. That is what it means. 1 Kings 8:60 says that all the peoples of the earth may know that the Lord is God, there is no other. This word again says that God is the God of all the earth and that everyone should know that He is God. Coming to the Hebrew version also, we said that the word that used here is earth and the people. Both the terms are used here. Coming to Psalms 22:27, all the ends of the earth will remember and turn to the Lord, all the ends of the earth, and all the families of the nations will bow down before Him. This can't be more clear than this, I think. This verse clearly shows that all the people are meant to, or all men are supposed to follow God. The word used here is Goyim, which Mayaram also usually refers to as Gentile nations. So that is an additional point here. The Bible has prophetic verses which speak of the future, probably after the resurrection of Jesus Christ, as I already said in another video. Isaiah 49:6 it says that I will make you a light for the Gentiles, that my salvation may reach to the ends of the earth. As I said, the concept is that the salvation will come to Jews, and from the Jews it will go to the whole world, to all the Gentiles. That concept is predominant in the Old Testament, as seen in this verse. Coming to the Hebrew version also, it speaks of Gentiles. The Goyim word is used here, and all the earth, all the people of the earth. This is undisputed. There is no doubt in these verses at all. It is clear that God of the Old Testament is God meant for all the earth, all the tribes, all the people. Coming to the next verse, Jeremiah 3:17 states that at that time they will call Jerusalem the throne of the Lord, and all nations will gather in Jerusalem to honor the name of the Lord. No longer will they follow the stubbornness of their evil arts. Here again, the name that is used here is nations. The Hebrew version also says nations. Coming to another verse, Zephaniah 2:11, the nations around the world will worship the Lord, each in their own land. This verse says that people will worship this God of the Old Testament from their own lands. The peoples, nations, Goyim, the word is used. Coming to the next objection, Bible is a book about the Israelites and only for the Israelites. We need to understand a little bit of an overview of this Old Testament and New Testament concept. Herein we need to know that Jesus Christ was born, lived and died during the Old Testament. God revealed Himself to different people during the Old Testament and to the New Testament also. In the Old Testament, He revealed Himself to Adam, Abraham, Jacob, Isaac, Moses, so on and so forth. And He had a particular covenant with them. There were certain rules like ritual rules and Levitical rules, Deuteronomical rules, which are applicable only to those times, those people alone. It cannot be applied to the New Testament believer like the Christians or the Jewish Christians. Here again, the question is being asked, why did God only choose to preach the gospel to the Jews and not to the Gentiles and Samaritans? The question is actually similar to asking someone during lunchtime, have you finished your dinner? That is how ridiculous it is, right? There is a timing and a place for asking such questions. It is according to the plan of God that He will reveal His covenant to the Jewish people first during His lifetime, and only after His resurrection that it will pass on to the Gentiles as a fulfillment of the verses that we already saw in the Old Testament. So after the resurrection of Jesus Christ and after the Holy Spirit is sent, we see that the gospel is not only meant for the Jews, it is also sent to the Gentiles. To the Gentiles through Paul, and to the Jews through Peter and his company. This is mentioned clearly in Acts chapter 10, 17 to 24, where Peter receives a particular prophetic vision, wherein God says that you should not consider any person as Gentile, anyone as outsider. Everyone should be considered within the fold of the God, Jehovah. Coming to the next objection, number 3, why Israel was chosen and not other nations or tribes? This is a very common question. Why God had to choose a very particular small country in the Middle East? Why couldn't he choose India, or why couldn't he choose America or any other nation that were present? First of all, we need to understand something, that God is not showing favoritism here. That is not the whole point at all. It is not that Israel was a superior nation or a more intelligent nation or more stronger nation. There are other reasons which we will be seeing now. Amos 3, 1-3 mentions that because God has chosen Israel, because he has chosen Israel from among the families of the earth, I will punish you for all your iniquities. We see this commonly in the Bible, in the Old Testament, so many times, so many places where God punishes Israel mercilessly. I mean, it's very difficult and for us to read in the present context at all. In Deuteronomy 7, 6-8, we see that Lord did not set his love upon you, nor chose you, because you are more in number than any people, for you are the fewest of all people. The verse clearly mentions that he chose Israel not because it was stronger or better than other nations, because it was weaker than other nations. That was the whole point of choosing this nation. By choosing a weaker nation, God was really proclaiming his own glory and power, manifesting through this weak nation. Coming to the objection number 4, every tribe in the Old Testament was a caste. This is an absolutely ridiculous sort of a translation. Mr. Senpaga Perumal is like superimposing our present day caste definition of our Indian subcontinent into the Israel context, which was present 3000 years ago. That's not really true at all. Each of the children of the 12 children of Israel were not castes, they were tribes. They were simply having a genealogy, common genealogy. They were allowed to intermarry. There was no superiority between the each tribes. So this kind of a claim is really not at all applicable at all. The translation, the use of word caste here is wrong. Coming to the next objection, number 5, Jesus is falsely called as Christ and Messiah of the world. Here he is claiming that the word Christ or Messiah was used or introduced only by Paul at a later date, which is not true again. We will see a couple of verses here. Mark 1:1, it starts by saying Gospel of Jesus Christ. Matthew 16:15-16 says, you are the Christ, Son of the living God, where Peter confesses this. Where Jesus asks Peter, who do you say I am? And he says that you are the Christ. That idea of Jesus being the Christ was predominant even before Paul came into the scene. John 1:41 says, we have found the Messiah. And Matthew 26:67 is significant because here we see Jesus being arrested and being tortured by the Roman soldiers. And they mockingly ask him, if you are Christ, why don't you prophesy who is hitting you? Right? There are so many other verses. Luke 23:35, he is the Christ of God, his chosen one. John 4:25, Messiah who is called Christ, and so on and so forth. This concept was not introduced by Paul. It was already predominant in the Mark, Matthew traditions itself. Coming to objection number 6, gospel was initially preached only to the Jews, and Paul fraudulently took it to the Gentiles. The fact of the matter is, it is true that the Gentiles were excluded initially because it was not known to the apostles clearly. But we see in the Acts of the Apostles chapter 11 that a revelation or a vision was given to Apostle Peter, wherein he was told that God revealed to him that he should not exclude anyone as Gentiles or exclude anyone as outsiders or foreigners, that everyone should be brought into the kingdom of God through Jesus Christ. That was a whole revelation. As a proof, he also sees a particular centurion who is a Gentile who gets converted right in front of him. Another chapter 8 verse 27, we see Philip evangelizing and baptizing an Ethiopian, a Gentile. This happened before Paul even comes into the scene. They did not have any kind of issues or reservations to say that they should not baptize anyone outside the range of Israel, within the geographic range or within the tribes of Israel. Coming to objection number 7, Jesus never preached to the Gentiles or Samaritans. Again, as I mentioned, you cannot go to someone during lunchtime and ask whether they are going to take dinner. Right? The time is not suitable. during the life of Jesus Christ, preached to the Jews and avoided the Gentiles and Samaritans. Even in that kind of a situation, we see that he actually heals the Canaanite woman, right? Another event in Matthew 8:5, we see a centurion, a Gentile centurion, whose servant is healed by Jesus Christ. The claim is made by Mayaram that the centurion was not a Gentile, that he was a Jew. It is true that many centurions and many other soldiers were Jews, but in this case, we see specifically in that verse that Jesus recommends and Jesus appreciate this fellow, that he has not found such great faith even in the entire land of Israel. That itself proves that he was a Gentile, not a Jew. Another verse in John 4:25-26, here we see that Samaritan woman confessing that when the Messiah comes, both the Jews and the Gentiles will worship God in the common place. That was a sort of ideology that was present, right? I'm not saying Jesus Christ said that, but the Samaritan woman herself knew that when the Messiah, the Christ comes, both the Jews and the Gentiles will be worshipping the same God in the same place. That was the whole point of it. Objection number 8, Jews had different gods for different tribes. There is no biblical evidence to suggest this at all. What we have is archaeological evidence wherein we see that there are different gods unearthed during archaeological findings in the nation of Israel. What it actually means is that many of the Israelites were rebelling against God and worshipping the foreign gods, pagan gods. That is what it means. You cannot interpret archaeology apart from history, the documented history, right? They were not polytheistic, they were monotheistic, but in most of the times they were rebelling against God and worshipping other gods. So therefore, when archaeology is taken in isolation, we assume that they are a polytheistic nation. Objection number 9, Numbers 3:10 says that any other foreigner who comes near me should be put to death. Of course, as usual, Shanbaga Perumal intentionally misquotes this verse. This verse is not talking about foreigners or people from other nation. This is talking about Aaron and his sons. That only those people, the genealogy of Aaron, were allowed to be priests, and anyone from the tribes of Israel itself, besides these genealogy, who comes near the sanctuary should be put to death. That is what it means. This is not about foreigners at all. Let's see a couple of verses where it says how they deal with the foreigners. Exodus 12:48, a foreigner residing among you who wants to celebrate the Lord's Passover must have all the males in his household circumcised, then he may take part like one born in the land. No uncircumcised male may eat it. This clearly says that a foreigner who doesn't belong to the tribes of Israel can become a Jew and partake of the Passover after the sufficient rituals are completed. That's what it is. As if like he's born in the same land. Coming to another verse, Isaiah 56:6 says that the foreigner who binds himself to the Lord, if he is going to be sincere in his attempt, sincere in his faith, his burnt offerings and sacrifices will be acceptable on my altar, and my house will be called a house of prayer for all nations. This is a wonderful verse from Isaiah which says that foreigners who are really having faith in God of the Bible and wants to follow him will be accepted just as much as the Jews are accepted. This should really clear up all doubts that the foreigners are supposed to be like inferior or kafirs to the covenant of the Jews. That is not the case at all. The foreigners were united into the covenant of the Old Testament as much as the Jews were, but it was volitional. Objection number 10. Christians claim about Tirukkural, St. Thomas and India being a Christian country. And another claim is that love is an emotion. I'm sorry, but I do cringe at the idea that Tirukkural is a Christian text, or that St. Thomas came to India, or that India became a Christian nation because of St. Thomas. Whether St. Thomas came here or not is another issue which we will deal later on, but that is completely irrelevant to the message of Jesus Christ. Right? Whether he came here or not, it doesn't really alter the fact that Jesus Christ was a real person and that really he is who he claims to be. Right? I understand that. I share the pain that Shanbaga Perumal goes through when he hears Christians say this. I understand. But what he fails to understand is that love is not just an emotion. There are different types of loves that are explained in the Greek gospel, one of which is called as agape love. It is a selfless, unmerited, sacrificial love which is given to an undeserving person by a person who is at an higher level. Right? In this case, we have God who is sacrificing himself for an undeserving group of people who did not even ask for it, out of his own selfless love for that group of people. That is what it is. I think that is unique for the Christian faith.